Scale, exit, repeat. 8 principles to win at the startup game with Eric Malka, Art of Shaving. Today we have a great show for you. We are so excited to have the Art of Shaving founder online. I figure we'll let's let the room build up here. And while we do that, I was going to play our theme song just for a minute or two here, just to get us let the room build up here. And I'm going to start us in the middle. Disrupting the systems, rewriting the plans. It's not just a hustle, it's speed, brilliant gold. It's lighting a path for the brave and the bold. We are open, building futures from words unspoken. They call us crazy, we wear it proud. Voices quiet, but impact loud. We fall, we fight, we rise anew, because that's just what founders do. We are the change, the truth, the glue. We are entrepreneurs through and through. And that is our theme song at Startup Club. I like to play it once in a while. We let the room fill in. If you wanted to listen to it, just go to YouTube, Startup Club channel. It's called We Are Entrepreneurs. It's quite inspiring. I wrote the lyrics with my friend AI. So I wrote the lyrics originally and we put it into AI, and we actually were able to produce that with using some pretty phenomenal AIs to help create that song, but also the video. And today we're talking about the principles of AI, the 8 principles to win at the startup game with Eric Malka. And Eric's the founder of Art of Shaving, and he'll be joining us in a minute. But 8 principles to win at the startup game with Eric Malka. And I know he wrote an article on Startup Club, and he's now a contributing author to Startup Club. And Michelle, I don't know if you wanted to just like tee up the article. I know you've got it there in front of you and you've been reading it today. And we'd love to have you tee this one up and moderate today.
Yeah, I'm going to first say we've had Eric on before, and actually, it was one of our most popular shows. Eric is amazing. His story's amazing. At that time, we were talking about his book, On the Razor's Edge. In fact, I have it in front of me right now, which is really cool. It's just so impressive, Eric, how you came from this immigrant, right, into this country, and not as a young child, a little bit older, and then how you just raised to sell into a massive major brand, probably one of the most popular brands, I might say worldwide. I think it was Gillette, actually. And I would say you really hopped onto a trend. That sounds, and I mean that in a positive way, but you really saw an opportunity and got in on it on the right way. So, Eric, we're so
Hi
excited
there.
to have you. So let's get started. And you tell us, like, what has been like, how did you do it? I know we have these 8 foundations, but I'm sure you have your overriding principles about what motivated you to really take the steps and get where you are today. Eric.
Hi. Thanks for having me on again. And thank you for the intro. Very nice. What I think the recipe for me was a dash of desperation, a little bit of talent on both my wife's aspects of the business and my own, and a lot of grit, a lot of resilience to jump into action and turn a small opportunity into a real mega brand, which is the philosophy that I follow these days. It's less about the idea than it is about the execution of that idea. And we can see it over and over again with incredible brands in many industries. When you really peel the layer of the onions on many brands, you realize the fundamental idea was extremely simple, and sometimes even in a saturated marketplace. But the way they executed their idea was extremely novel and relevant to the time. I think that's what happened to us. We inadvertently executed the idea of opening a small shop on the Upper East Side of Manhattan selling luxury shaving products in a way that was never really done. And the timing of it was incredibly fortuitous for us. So that's a little bit of how this whole thing was ignited.
I'd love to hear just what. Let's go to the beginning for a second. I know we want to jump into these 8 principles,
All right,
but
Malcolm.
apparently you're a fellow Canadian, right? You came to this country and just start from the beginning. And we love
Well,
the
we
story. We
think you're
love to hear the
Canadian
stories.
because what we read in the book is you came in from Montreal, but then I saw something about Casablanca. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a mutt. I was born in Casablanca. My family moved to Montreal, and I spent my teenage years in Montreal. And at the age of 17, I just hated my life and wanted all I wanted was to get out of Montreal and get as far away as possible as I could from it. I love it now, but this is the mindset of a 17-year-old back then. And I sold my record collection and bought a Greyhound bus ticket to New York City. I was making my way to New Jersey to work on the boardwalk, as many young kids from Montreal did in the summertime. And on the way there, my cousin who lived in New York City offered me a job, and I decided to stick around and started working as a warehouse clerk in the garment district in what was it is now a very posh area, but back then it was the center of crack heaven in New York City. So it was quite a dangerous neighborhood, but I was the happiest guy on earth living in New York City. And long story short, 24 years later, I sold my company to Procter and Gamble. So that's really the journey I talk about in my book and in podcasts like this one. What happened? The odds were stacked greatly against me, obviously. I was undocumented, was very young. I had no money to my name. I had no formal education to speak of. And yet I was able somehow to, within about 11, less than 12 years from landing at Port Authority, I started the art of shaving with my wife, Miriam. And 12 years later, we were acquired by Procter and Gamble after becoming the leading premium men's grooming brand in the US. So
All right,
that's,
I'm very interested in what you're saying about brands because it's a hard area, right? When you're talking about consumer goods, right?
yeah.
Is we also run a brand, paul.com, and there's always this friction between like how much to try to be a brand purist versus not, just like selling. Like I find that I'm just like very difficult, especially in this age of social
Well,
media.
yeah.
Help me out here. Like, what's the balance? And
Look,
when you say brand, what do you mean by brand? Because it means so many
well, first
different
of
things.
all, branding is an art. Scaling a business is a science, right? And you need the two of those things to work together, both art and science, no pun intended to my company. And to me, a brand is the relationship between what your company represents in the consumer's mind. And that is a long term play. That's what really, if you want to build a brand versus just building a company, the advice I gave to people is that, first of all, it's much harder to create a recognizable brand in the marketplace than it is to create a successful company. And every brand is a company, but not every company is a brand. So let's start there. Secondly, building a brand is a marathon. It takes time. You don't become a brand overnight, with exceptions to the rule, and usually with companies that either have hit this tipping point very quickly or have tremendous amount of firepower behind them. But usually, even if you're a big company launching a new brand, it's a reset button. It's like climbing a whole new mountain. So we can talk about branding all day long, and I don't know what you want to know about that, but that's a very broad subject, one that I hold very dearly to my heart, by the way.
So, what would you recommend? We have a lot of startups in the room here. and people just thinking about like actually starting, they're even very early stage, should
Yeah.
they be like hyper focused on their brand and it's beautiful and the logo and the colors and the pictures, or should they be trying to just get out there and prove it? Like that's where the
You
friction
gotta,
comes.
yeah, you have to manage both. It's a juggling act. From day one, you should decide if you want to build a brand or not. It's not something that you decide down the road. It's something that you breathe and live every single moment from the time you put pen to paper. But that could be that can come into friction with running the business itself. So that's a juggling act. And those are business has the fundamentals that needs to be respected. A lot of entrepreneurs that are building brands sometimes get ahead of themselves. A brand is not something you build overnight. Even when you fast track, even when the stars align, that's something that takes time to build relationships with customers and also for you to understand who you are as a brand. It's
Yeah,
not
I was
just
gonna say that it's evolving, right? Like we should
it's definitely evolving. I remember we really became the brand that people know about 6 years after starting the business. That's when we really started to understand who we were as a brand and how to communicate that value proposition correctly to the customer. So it's an ongoing brand is like a living being. A business is more like a machine. It's well run. It needs to be oiled and taken care of, and it can run faster and better. But a brand is more like a person. It's something that evolves, that goes from infancy to maturity, and constantly needs to be reinvented and cared for and nurtured. So those are the two dynamics that need to live side by side. And oftentimes, you'll see in very successful companies, including my own, that there are two people at the helm, right? A lot of time, two founders working together. In our case, my wife was the brand police and I was the business entrepreneur. And together we created that tugging war where I wanted to go after some money I saw down the road. And sure enough, it wasn't good for the brand. So the brand police was there to keep me in check and vice versa, right? Sometimes the brand police wants to, there's nothing is good enough for the brand. No amount of investment is good for the brand. So you need the business side to also rein that in and understand how much to invest by when. Because if you start investing way too much on the brand side, on brand awareness and brand image from day one, you can run out of steam
Oh
before the
yeah,
business has the chance to
like really
really.
bad and not get off of first base. Like that's the balance, right?
That's
Like
right. And yes. And what I used to always tell my team is that one of the greatest branding element is generating a tremendous amount of revenue. You know, a lot of people buying your product is a good sign that your brand is on the right track. It doesn't mean, but a brand is like, it's like a person's reputation, right? It can take 20 years to build a reputation in your community and 1 second to lose it, right? So those are some of the thoughts that come to mind when there is about this tugging war between branding and operating a successful
Wow.
business.
Okay, so we have a tight show today. We have a lot of people wanting to come on stage and ask you questions, Eric. And I know we have
Yes.
a very hard stop at 3 o'clock. But I know you started with number eight first, branding. But before we move on from branding, I had a question about personality. Is somehow your personality and your wife's personality seem to come out with the product. And by the way, I shaved this
Oh,
morning
for
and
sure.
started shaving. I still use the product today. I think it's still the best product on the market. I know it was never as good when you ran the business. Okay, they may have changed a few ingredients, but I'm telling you,
Yeah.
it's still the best product on the market. You did a phenomenal job. But tell me about personality. How does personality play in a brand? And then why don't you just jump into like number one, two, and three after that?
Look, a company is is finding a way to generate profits. That's what a company is for. A brand is an extension of who you are. That's the manifestation of who you are. In our case, as I tell people, we were not particularly passionate about the shaving category. I didn't even enjoy shaving personally. I don't know a lot of guys that shave as a pleasurable experience. However,
Honestly, I hated it until your product. I swear to God, I'd
that's
wake up
right.
and I'm like,
So
honestly, if I
that
got the
was
Gillette in my hand, the shit it was like horrible. But I got your stuff. I'm like, wow, this is really. I feel. I don't know. It makes my day happier. I'll tell you that.
Of course, it's that's the whole premise of our brand is to create an enjoyable experience in the morning. That's we didn't know the term back then, but we invented self-care for men. The point I was making it was about personality. And what we did is we weren't really passionate about shaving. We saw it as an opportunity, but then we infused who we are into the brand, natural ingredients, beautiful aesthetics, luxurious experience, customer service, all the things that we and attracting great talent, building a company culture, all the things that we were passionate about as human beings, we infused into that vehicle, and that's, of course, it became an extension of who we are. You can see our fingerprint on that brand all day long.
All right. So why don't you jump into one, two, and three? I know because we got a lot of people who want to ask questions and jump on stage here, and
Yeah, listen,
so
we can get through it fast. I mean, the
yeah.
principles are pretty simple. They can be narrowed down to a few. Mindset is super important. A lot of entrepreneurs get caught in this sprint mentality. This is a marathon. You have to have grit. You're going to be tested along the way. You can't be reckless either. I recommend prudence. Grit and action creates opportunities. Opportunities creates luck, and that's the mindset. We talked about execution. To me, the idea is
Okay, but you
less.
can't go that
Yes.
fast. Okay, so mindset.
Okay.
Go back to mindset. So there's this
Sure.
thing that goes through every entrepreneur's mind, even myself. I know it goes through you. I know it goes through Quinn, my son down here in the audience, and every other entrepreneur in this audience here who thinks, what if I fail? What's the mindset to go into something and
Good.
take that risk,
Good.
to stick your
You
neck out there and
listen.
be embarrassed if you fail? Tell me about that.
I don't think there's any embarrassment to failure. I think you should come into this fight.
Agreed.
I think you should come into this fight knowing that 90% of startups will fail. That's the statistics. And you don't want to be one of those statistics. You want to be the 10%, which means that it's like applying to Harvard versus applying to a community college. One is has a 3% acceptance rate, the other one has 90%, right? So you need to be on your top game. This is not going to be a walk in the park. If you go into this thinking this is going to be easy or I'm afraid to fail, you're already starting on the wrong foot. What you need to go in with eyes wide open, emotionally very sturdy. You're gonna be tested. They're gonna, the world, the universe is gonna try to find out how much you really want this because you're gonna be tested. You know what I'm talking about. And then something that I had built into me that was hugely important was prudence. And that's not about avoiding risk. It's about really making smart decisions and minimizing the mistakes along the way. I always talk about the tennis players. The championships are won by the guy that has the least unforced errors, not the one that has the most winners. It's a statistic in tennis that can be applied to business as well. I feel that my success was due not only to our talents, but our ability to avoid the pitfalls along the way. That's what again, all these principles we can talk about for hours. Mindset is everything. The second principle is, to me, is execution. I'd rather invest today in an incredible team with a simple idea than a bad team with an incredible idea, right? We just saw shops like this in London. We thought it could do well in New York City, but they had to be reinvented. These London shops were from the 1800s, and we wanted to bring this to an American male consumer in New York City. We wanted to infuse it with our heritage. My wife's French side, you could see that in our products with lavender, ingredients from Morocco from my side, interiors the way they were done with a lot of European flair and so forth. Our success was really due to the excellent execution of the idea from, and not only in the product side or in the store side, but also having great employees and an incredible company culture, securing prime retail location. I think our success was due to not being afraid to pay Madison Avenue rent to sell $18 shaving creams, which sounds really stupid even when I'm saying it. But at the end of the day, anyone that came to copy us in New York City couldn't get past the rent. They had to find a location that was 20% of the rents that we were paying at the time. And of course, they didn't have the foot traffic, they didn't have the location that we had. Our execution, looking back on it, was really spot on. And I think execution is everything when you're starting a
Look,
new
I, I,
business.
I I feel like you all had a really strong instinctual feeling and belief, and I'm going to say it was belief, okay, about what would work and what people would like. And you just refused to relent. That's
Yes,
what
and
I'm hearing.
yes and no. There's always a little bit of luck. And the luck that we
Yes.
had, the luck that we had with our first two stores. Don't forget, we built two stores before we created our own brand, which was really the big game changer at the end. And for 2 years, my wife and I worked inside those stores. It was like having a laboratory. And all day long, we would have men. They looked the same psychology, the same clothes, the same look, and they came in day after day telling us what they wanted, how they wanted it. These types of insights are very hard to get, even if you do very expensive focus groups. So we had thousands of guys telling us the same thing day in, day out. We would have had to be crazy not to listen to what they had to say. They were all saying the same thing. Do you have anything with fragrance free? Do you have anything for sensitive skin? I'm not getting a close shave. If I try to get a close shave, it burns my
Mhm.
skin. So everything we built was around that customer that we understood so clearly.
All right,
So understand,
customers first. Customers
yes.
first. And then but my point is, you believe so strongly in the idea that you were comfortable putting the money, because I'm sure that wasn't cheap, what you did.
It wasn't cheap, but it was, we didn't have a lot of budget, so we had to make it cheaper than it
Right.
was. I remember my wife and I having instinctual feelings that we knew exactly what we needed to do and how we needed to do it. We were very convinced about that. I don't know what it was, but we really had a pulse on the market, on the customer. I think it had to do with the fact that we were so in touch with our customer and with our industry and with our concept.
I think you guys were very passionate, if I'm hearing this correctly. Like,
We're
amazing.
very, I'm always, yeah, I'm passionate about everything I do. I was very passionate about the art. I wasn't passionate about shaving, but I was passionate about the art of shaving for sure.
And it's very awesome that you had your wife as a partner.
Yeah, that was essential. My wife is extremely talented. I think I have a lot of talents as well. And I think neither of us would have been as successful without the complementary skills of the other. So it was really like two very talented people coming together and bringing very complementary skills to the table at the perfect time. These are the perfect storms, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, these are the
All
perfect
right.
storms.
So we've got four people here, Eric, that really want to, I think, ask a question
Please.
or give some of their experience. So let's bring it on. So first we have, I'm going to say Geo.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. Go for it. What is your question for Eric or comment? This
Greetings.
is,
Thank you very much for having me around here. Also, I would want to say thank you very much for the amazing advices that you've just said. You've talked about, I am Jafar. I am 28 years old. I used to be a businessman since I was 24. I have I've postponed my business. I used to own multi-cluster data center as well as an online store.
Mhm.
So I would want to ask you a few questions. One of them was that in your definition, what you define a branding or a brand, and second was that when it comes to the working group, if I would want to elaborate it, that I've had an employees around the world from many
Mhm.
different regions, and I was always standing there and supporting, just disregarding the fact if there is any production or if there is no production. I've been always standing there and supporting my team and disregards anything. I disregard if my business was suffering out of it, which it was. I would want to ask you, when it comes to that matter, what kind of team and how to handle such a responsibility when it comes to putting people to be partaking into your own business, as well as how do you define branding and brand after all. And I'd be really appreciated for your advice.
So you're asking, how do you approach branding from a culture standpoint, for your employee standpoint?
That's right.
Culture and branding work together. It's hard to have one without the other, right? To create a strong company culture, you need to have a very strong brand with a really strong purpose in front of it, right? And that's what really motivates deeply your teams to not only join your company, but to work really hard for the success of that company and to embody the brand themselves. And usually that's a deep purpose. In our case, the purpose for the art of shaving was to promote men's health. We did that through natural ingredients and removing synthetic toxic ingredients from all shaving products that we sold. And that was something that gave our employees a sense that they were not just working for a dollar, but they were also doing something good and being part of something greater than themselves. I don't know if that answered your question, but when it comes to employees, I take care of my people.
Right.
I'm a
Colin,
people person.
yeah, I think this reminds me of having a mission, right? Like the culture is formed around a mission. So
Yeah,
and it's led from the top, right?
that's right. In my case, we did an inverted pyramid management style. The culture comes from the top down, and it's something you live every minute of every day. But we really inverted our pyramid. I understood from being in my stores day one and dealing with customers and being very passionate about, obsessive about customers, that our staff, our frontline sales teams were the lifeblood of the company. They were ambassadors, and our job as management team was to really support their missions and to make sure that they were as successful as could be. That means I took care of them. I care about them. I care about my vendors. I care about my employees. I care deeply about my customers. It's all about people and
Thank
collaboration.
you. Thank you. That's quite clear for me.
Yeah, and Eric, you keep talking about your stores, but I perceive your success came from your product and distribution. Can you
Both,
talk a little
both.
bit about that? Was it from both though? Really? Did Procter and
Well,
Gamble buy you because of stores, or did they buy you because you had the best product and brand on the market?
yeah, we were primarily a brand. That then you have your distribution of your brand, and the distribution of your brand can be online. It can be in third-party retailers, and it can be in your own brick and mortar stores. In our case, we had all three. So our stores were really more of a distribution channel, a great distribution channel. It was a big part of our revenue because they generated so much money. So yes, at the end of the day, Procter and Gamble bought our IP, The Art of Shaving, and its logo, and they bought our proprietary products. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Okay, great. So, yes, you're right that at the end of the day, it was the product and the brand, the proprietary products and the brand that was of great value. The stores is how we started this company to generate. It was our economic engine, if you will. It was the way that we were able to acquire and retain customers profitably. We also sold to over 1,000 retailers nationwide and across the world, where we would be able to sell our products to their customers as a middleman. And then we had our online business, which at the time was only about 10% of our sales.
All right, we have
Interesting. Thank you
Sammy.
very much.
Sammy coming up.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to come back to you in a second, guys. It's about brand and brand longevity, but I'm going to come back.
Hey Eric, how are you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for all this extensive knowledge here. I know you guys have built a great brand and I love to hear the story. I'm actually in Canada myself. I live in Mississauga, right by Toronto. So we're experiencing the
Nice.
cold weather here.
I know
Um,
you are.
but I had two questions while I'm here. One is, where did you put your focus while positioning and building your brand alongside others competing in your space to ensure your growth in the business? And then the other question was, is there ever a time where you need to reposition your brand? Is there ever a sign
Yeah.
where you need to pivot?
I wouldn't say on the first question, the way we positioned ourselves from day one, which was really the best thing we've ever done, was to really be the greatest of one thing and not just another brand in everything. So shaving, we own shaving from day one. Luxury shaving. Nobody had taken that spot. Nobody claimed that mountain. And we didn't come in as a men's grooming brand. We didn't come in as a skincare brand. We came in as a luxury shaving brand. And that was really important. We never deviated from that. I would make sure my employees never, as soon as I heard them say the art of grooming, we had a problem. So that was one. I never really pivoted away. I wouldn't call it pivoted away from our core strategy. It was more of an evolution. As we matured as a brand, we started to understand our messaging better and our positioning. So we became more and more sophisticated as we grew. The big pivot was in our strategy. Our strategy pivoted quite a bit. And I think that's necessary when you're a small growing brand versus an enormous conglomerate, right? You cannot pivot all the time when you're a multi-billion dollar business, but a small business trying to figure out where the treasure is sometimes have to pivot. And we did that. We pivoted in 2001 away from retail, brick and mortar, and opened up distribution. And then in 2004, we did the reverse pivoting where we repivoted back to building our stores. We started building one new store every month across the nation. So that's how we look at that.
So rather than, I guess, repositioning and almost starting over in a different direction, you build off of it.
Sometimes you have to reposition. That's a hard pill to swallow. It's almost like going back to the drawing board, but
Sometimes it's
business,
necessary.
yeah, I've experienced that with other businesses where I realized I should have positioned myself differently. Now I'm at the point where do I reposition myself or do I just call it a day? So that's a personal decision, but that's a tougher one. Pivots when it comes to strategy and employees and tactics, that's one thing. But when you have fundamental issues with your brand or with your position or certain elements, that's a little trickier.
Gotcha. Appreciate the feedback on that and the knowledge shared. And
My pleasure.
yeah, it's great. Great to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Passing it down to the younger generation there, Eric. We have one of our favorites on stage right now. It's Dr. Roshanek, and she is always great at the mindset, the understanding the entrepreneurial mind. We'd love to hear from you, Doctor.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I love the space and I love art of shaving actually.
Thank
I'm
you.
a woman, but whenever I was thinking of what could I get that is really unique and wonderful for
Yes.
a gentleman, I would think of art of shaving. This is since ages ago, right? So you
Yes.
really did have the corner on that space.
Yes.
While I love to talk about how the brain works and why these things that you're saying are all true, I do have a question that came up in my mind as you were speaking. You talked about your first pivot was 2001 where you went away from the brick and mortar and you went to distribution, but then you came back and you're like, I'm building a new store every month.
Yeah.
And for most people, I think it would be hard for them to do that simply because I left this and I can't go back to it. This is
Yeah.
not what I was doing. And so it's almost like
Sure.
it's going through the garbage or going through the trash
Yeah.
or I failed or something. So can you speak to how,
Yeah, that's excellent.
thank you.
That's an excellent question because I was criticized as a CEO for doing that. I was perceived as being wishy-washy, but in reality, I was navigating this ship and I was seeing down the road that there were threats and I would take different routes. So it turned out that fortunately for me, I was on the right side of that. But it's true that conventional wisdom sometimes tell us stick to your strategy. And I don't believe in that. I think you have to have a strong compass as far as your brand is concerned. But then your strategy, the analogy I use in my book is that we're a little bit like treasure hunters. There's no We have a business plan and we know there's a treasure at the end, but we're not sure how to get there. And we get clues along the way. And sometimes we have to backtrack. Sometimes we fall into traps. Sometimes we have threats. Sometimes we find people on our way that help us move forward. But another analogy is the river raft, right? I was told a long time ago that if you canoe down a white river, your wooden boat is going to crash onto the rocks. What you need is a very flexible, rubber like craft with a team rowing in the same direction. I think flexibility in your strategy is essential. And as a leader, I was never afraid to pivot when I had new data that suggested that we need to pivot towards a different direction. That's how I looked at it.
Yeah, I think that's the first. Sorry, go ahead, doctor.
Please.
They have to have a boat going down a river, and it's got to be flexible, and everybody's working in the same direction. And you're going to hit this rock and that rock, and you got to pivot. And I think it's very interesting. That's a really cool analogy, doctor.
You can
Thank
use
you
it
so
all
much.
you want, Colin. I'll share it. I'll give you the copyrights.
I love it. I love what you said because what it is, what it you presented was a new narrative. It was a different narrative, and it goes back to quite a lot of what I've been hearing from you also, that connects to expectation. The thing you said earlier on is that you came in with purpose. You had something absolutely in your head. There was a thing that you were doing, and so you stayed. And you've been talking about brand, and then also the business, and this is, I see where the alignment is, that when when you have a purpose and you stay with purpose, then you keep honoring just that, and that shifts perception and expectation, which then shifts our ability to go with what we see or fight it. So resistance is what stops us, unlike your flexible boat, right? There's very
Yeah.
little resistance. So what I hear from you is that you were single-mindedly connected to your purpose, and so expectations were very different, perception was very different, and that opened up for you the ability to really, first of all, receive what was going on around you, and then secondly to act upon that. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a lot of truth to that. I was also the CEO, which I felt one of my great responsibility was to craft a strategy to move this expedition forward. So that's what I did. I felt this. I'm a strategist. I think that's one of my strengths. And I was creating strategies. And with new data, sometimes suggest you need to alter your strategy, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
but so
so
many people don't alter their strategy. They see that they could or should. They get the markers, they get the information comes into them, they see it, but then they turn a blind eye to it. That's the resistance, which you then didn't have
That's
with
the
your flexible
resistance.
book.
It could also be fear, and it often is a lack of data. Sometimes I see it every day, entrepreneurs trying to make decisions without the information required to make that decision. Decision should not be that complicated. If you have the right data, the decision makes itself. So if you're finding yourself stuck, you just need to go out and find the data you need to make that decision.
yeah, and Eric, you talk about in your principles the scalability principle. And by the way, they're all really good. We could probably do 3 or 4 shows here together. But scalability, because I just want to put you in a mindset here of here you are, like one store, you're getting it going, you're starting to get traction. How do you go from there to selling to Procter and Gamble? I don't know. What was it? Systems? Was it strategic planning? Give us some of your stuff, some of your good stuff from the article in the book.
Yeah, scalability is basically having a proven method to acquire and retain customers profitably. We did that with our stores, then we did that with third party retailers. Our stores delivered 30 to 35% unit economic profits to our company. Once we were able to do that consistently, but not only do that consistently, but also have the systems to run stores across the nation, because it's one thing to run 3 or 4 locations, it's another one to run 100 locations. So of course It takes time for us to build the systems to scale, to build the teams, to build the processes, to manage those teams, and have enough traction that we can also get the funding we needed to scale the company. And what I like to tell people is that it took me 9 years to go from 0 to $10 million in revenue. And that sounds very slow, but then it took me 3 years, 2 years to get to 30 million from 10 million. And 2 years after that, we were at 50 million. And a few years after that, we were at 100 million. So it took 9 years to get to 10. It took another 9 years to get to 100. So the biggest pitfalls for entrepreneurs is trying to scale prematurely. You're trying to scale when you're not ready, when not all the foundation is set. Another analogy, since you've liked the last one, is it took 11 years to build the first spaceship or rocket ship, and it took 5 days to launch it to the moon. That's, to me, that's scalability. It takes a long time to build that foundation, to build a rocket ship. If you launch that rocket ship too soon, guess what happens? Blows up in the air. Same thing with a business. So to me, scalability is about building a well-oiled machine that's ready to take on growth capital to expand the process that you've created to create scale and growth.
Yeah, and I
And
think, like a hard question that people have to answer is, can you with confidence prove and explain for every X amount of dollars that you put into the business that it's going to yield obviously a multiplier beyond that? And I'm going to tell you that's not an easy thing to be able to
it's
be
not
able to
easy.
explain. It's not easy, and I think that's what you're saying. Like when you went to Procter and Gamble, like obviously, no, I don't think anybody would argue with that's one of the top companies in the world, hands down. Like you had to
Mhm.
be able to say, hey, people, if you put in $20 million, you're going to get X amount out. That's what's of interest to them. They have to account to shareholders.
Of course. And the way my company wasn't worth much to them. It was really the brand that was worth everything to them. We were we found a way to create a luxury brand in that shaving category that consumers were obsessed with. And they wanted that because they knew that through their machine they could scale it dramatically.
So
So
that's a great
we
example.
yeah, from an acquisition standpoint, I was trying to build, I was working in a lab. I was trying
Mhm.
to find the cure to that disease in the laboratory and test it and give proof that it works. Then I give it to a Pfizer or Procter and Gamble to mass produce it, mass distribute it. That's how they look at it. So when you look at my company, why would somebody pay 2 to 4 times, 5 times, even 9 times your sales, annual sales for your business, sometimes a business that's not even profitable, is because they know that you've cracked the code. And once you crack that code, they can take that code and blow it up. Unfortunately, they didn't do well with our brand because it was probably not the right brand. It was strategically aligned, but it was not the kind of company that succeeds within the Procter and Gamble umbrella. It was too small, too luxurious, too retail focused for them. Three
It is.
things that they were not in the business of. But their thinking is, we cracked the code in the lab. Now let's take that
There
technology,
you
let's take
go.
that IP and blow it up.
There you go. So it was strategic. So there we go. Another category, folks, is that was the strategic acquisition. Obviously, they had the research and the data to back it up. And you created, my friend, you and your wife created a category. So kudos to you.
Thank
Now
you.
we have one more person on the stage. Sula, I hope I said your name correctly.
So
We're, I'm
it's
sorry.
no, no worries. It's a Xuela, but super happy to be here. Loved all the insights and really thankful for it. My question, so my brand is a digital product and it's an app. I am wondering how you're navigating. I know that you mentioned about having a brick and mortar and how you're navigating the digital aspects in the digital era, and how you would say that social media and online presence has contributed to sales as well as visibility and brand credibility, especially because now we have Instagram, we have TikTok, we have all these social media presence. So just wondering how that
Yeah.
impacted sales.
Yeah, we often make the connection between today's digital age with when we started this company was pre-internet. But the principles are the same, right? The vehicles are different. In our days, our social media was the New York Times or Men's Health magazine or InStyle magazine print. You'd buy the magazine or it'd be delivered to your house and you'd see an article about us. That was organic. That was organic social. Then we could put ads in these magazines or on subway carts, and that was your paid ads. I think the same concept applies today in the digital world. It's just different. It's just digital versus analog. And the principles are the same. You want to promote your brand. Social media is an incredible tool that we didn't have, where you can reach a lot of customers with your message for relatively low amounts of money if you do it right. The question is what separates our strategy for PR, for example, with the next guy was that we were creating great content for these magazines, whether it was barber events or our stories about men or mustaches or trends. We had content that they needed to feed to their audiences. And the principle remains the same. The ones who win the game of social media is the one who has great content. It's not content for the sake of content. It's you have to be very thoughtful about it, on brand, and really feeding your audiences content that adds value to them and that is interesting to consume. So it's really very different times, same principles.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I definitely agree on the providing value through a
Thank
product.
you.
Of-
You've talked about starting, you've talked about scaling, you've now mentioned exiting. What about repeat? What's up for 2.0, Eric 2.0? And we know the book was
Oh,
great. We love the book. We
thank
do
you.
love the art of
Listen,
shaving,
for
Razor's
for
Edge.
yeah, for me, repeat is to repeat many times, but the difference is I'm no longer player on the court. I'm in the owner's box. I'm in the coaching team. I invest behind great founders who are building great brands. That's what I do today. And that's where I'm adding the most value. I don't want to be the CEO anymore. I want to be the guy that is making a difference in many brands and with to many founders. And that's what I dedicate my time to. That's why I wrote the book. That's why I'm doing podcasts when I'm invited like this, is to share some of the experience and expertise that I was lucky enough to acquire in my life to serve the next generation of entrepreneurs coming up. I think that's what really fills me up today.
I can't tell you how much we appreciate this, how much everybody in the audience does. And if you're listening to this in podcast, give it a he's a phenomenal speaker. We also do something pretty unique now with startup.club as we invest guests in we definitely invest, but we invite guest authors to come and do a guest article on Startup Club. And Eric did one for us, and it was called it's right there. You can click it above How to Succeed as a Startup Founder, 8 Principles from the Art of Shaving Founder. And if you want to be a guest author, you can also come onto Startup Club. Just send an email to hello@startup.club, and our editor, Mimi Ostrander, she's right there, a very young lady. She is the one who puts the website together. She's done a phenomenal job. I think, Eric, I was looking at a search engine. I was typing in what makes a startup founder successful, and your article hit the first page of Google, which was really
Oh,
cool.
nice.
Yeah, so it's getting a lot of great play. But what we also do is this show, for instance, will turn into another article on Startup Club because what we're doing with AI now is we take the transcript and we convert that to an article. Of course, Mimi does a lot of editing as well, and then we put up an article based on every show as well. And what AI is not looking for is AI generated content. What AI is looking for is original content. And what we've got here from the community of Clubhouse, from everybody here is on stage, everybody's asked questions and shared experience. That's original content. And that seems to be resonating very well on startup.club. And we really do appreciate this community that comes together. We've got some really cool authors. If you don't already know about this, go to startup.club and sign up to that email list. One, you'll hear about speakers like Eric, but then you'll also get a masterclass email, which Eric was featured in on the last email. I don't know if you know that, Eric, but our last
Mm.
email focused on your article and your principles. But you'll get a masterclass every month. We do one email a month, and it really goes in deep. It also has the time to sell index. We never got into the detail on that one, Eric, but 2009 was not the best time to sell. Not going to focus on that, but I've sold at the right time, the wrong time. I had $1 billion company, went down to zero in the dot-com crash. Since then, I've had to adjust our strategy, did a couple public companies, sold them at the right time, like a month before the Lehman crisis. GoDaddy, Michelle and I sold Dot Club before the Dot Club, before the tech wreck and crypto crash of 2022. So what we've done now is we actually has a time to sell index. We take 25 years of IPO data and we put that in there, and it's like an impartial sentiment index. Of course, every industry is different, but the reality is if you want to know when's a good time to raise money or a good time to sell your business, having a third party index can actually help you along.
Yep.
All right, you've been listening to Start Scale Legs Repeat. Eric, you got any last words? We got 2 minutes left. Any last words of advice for our budding entrepreneurs like Quinn there?
Yeah, the framework I'm working on right now for startups is the concept of crawl before you walk, before you run, and run before you fly. And really, that's the core of my philosophy. It's nobody's won a marathon by bolting out of the starting gates. So take your time in the beginning. It'll be highly rewarded at the end. Because to me, my philosophy is a little bit counterintuitive in the sense that if you can manage to avoid some of the pitfalls that destroys 90% of startups, then you can be in business long enough to figure out how to hit it out of the park. That's all I got.
Yeah, yep, I'm with you on that. All right, you've been listening to the show. Start Scale Legs Repeat. Have you ever got your copy? Get a copy of his book, Razor's Edge. I read it. It's a great way to listen to a fun story, but also learn a lot of lessons along the way. Thank you all. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Take care.